So good morning, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, participants who are joining us here in person or online, and welcome to our session towards more inclusive and fair climate action, a multi-level, multi-generational world. My name is Giorgia Rambelli, and I'm the coordinator for climate policy and energy governance at the European Secretariat of ICLEI, Local Government for Sustainability. And it is my pleasure to moderate the session here today. This session today is organized by ICLEI with the support of the EU-funded project Urban LEDs, jointly implemented by UN Habitat and ICLEI. And it takes place in the Multilevel Action Pavilion, right in the heart of COP26, the United Nations Conference on Climate Change here in Glasgow. So the focus of the program at the COP today is youth. And youth demonstration will and are already taking place in the streets of the cities around the conference venue, and as we speak, with a clear and loud request for immediate, ambitious, inclusive climate action now. And there is a very concrete reason behind these requests. As you might have read in the news in the past weeks, new research shows that a child born in 2020 will endure an average of 30 extreme heat waves in their lifetime. This is 7 times more than someone that was born in 1960. Today's children will also grow up to experience twice as many droughts and wildfires, and 3 times more river floods, crop failures than someone who is right now 60 years old. It is also clear that the dramatic effect of climate change will increasingly affect the daily life of communities across the world. And they will demand, of course, effective solutions. Many of these responses will have to be delivered at the local level, where communities are accessing services, including energy, water, food, but also accessing green spaces, affordables, and safe housing and mobility. As the areas in which most people live and work, and as the area often most affected by climate change, cities are increasingly acknowledged as the place and the arenas where the right solutions are developed and put in place. To be successful, though, these solutions must be planned, and they also need to take into account in a very proactive manner the economic effects, but also the social effect that they can afford to the most vulnerable part of our communities. So this is, of course, something that will require a very integrated and coordinated approach to ensure direct participation of citizens and effective multi-level governance, which more than ever is becoming a key ingredient for a successful and timely delivery. So governments worldwide are increasingly recognizing the importance of designing this cross-sectoral, trans-departmental, and multi-stakeholder climate action with a particular attention to the needs, the demands of new generations. And recently, there has been a growing role in mainstreaming climate action across the different policy being designed at all levels. So today, we want to discuss exactly this. We want to bring to the table all of these actors, including youth representatives, as well as national and local policymakers, to share an outlook on possible future governance and organizational structures. So through several rounds of discussion, we will discuss how multi-level and multi-generational governance can become a reality while defining and implementing climate action. We will start our journey from the future, and we will move back in time to discuss the current state of the art and outlining what are the needed steps to reach this effective integration and to include new generation into shaping and carrying out policies. So to join me in this time travel exercise, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Zihan. He is the UNFCCC Youth NGO Constituency Representative. Hello, Zihan. Thank you for being with us. Online, we have the pleasure to be joined by Joseph Pucheu Rocamora. He's the representative of the European Economic and Social Committee. Hello, Joseph, and thank you for being with us. We are also joined online by Sophie Katarina Wiegand. She's the youth representative also at the European Economic and Social Committee. Hello, Sophie. Thank you for being with us. And here in person are joining me Roberta Ianna. She's a senior expert for the Italian Ministry for Ecological Transition of Italy, which recently hosted, of course, pre-COP and youth COP. I'm also here joined by João Campos. He's the mayor of Recife, Brazil, a proud urban-led city. Thank you very much for being with us today. And then finally, last but not the least, by Imanol Zabaleta, is the director of the Center for Environmental Studies of Vitoria-Gasteiz in Spain. So we are starting now our conversation and our journey. And before we begin, I would like to invite everyone following us online to post their questions in chat. We will make sure that we address your insights, your ideas, and your questions later during our discussion. So please feel free to really share your thoughts with us. So looking at our context, I would like to ask our speakers, maybe starting from Roberta, looking at the context, looking at your country, which is actually my country as well. In 20 years from now, how are actors involved in shaping climate policy? Who are these actors? Which one are participating into developing these processes? And what is the role of youth in developing the processes? So we wake up in 20 years and we have a sustainable future. So how did we manage to reach that? Through what actors being involved?
Okay, hello. Good afternoon, everyone, because it's already afternoon and it's Youth and Public Empowerment Day today. So I am very happy and thankful for being invited to this event. I do apologize because I will not be able, unfortunately, to stay till the end because I'm a negotiator as well and need to go back to negotiating rooms. But it was important to be here and testimony the commitment of Italy. So in 20 years, we really hope it will be young people of today solving the problem of climate change. We are really enhancing their participation. We organized the Youth for Climate event in Milan back-to-back with the pre-COP, and I'm really proud to say that Italy is really leading at this point within the UNFCCC process the youth participation. So we invited almost 400 youth representatives in Milan for the pre-COP, and they developed a document which is called now Youth for Climate Manifesto, collecting their requests, instances, proposals for policymakers. And we really hope that this will be only the starting point for a concrete and continued dialogue between youth and governments. Today at 5:30 in Action Room 2, there will be a round table with ministers, my minister Roberto Cingolani, COP president, COP designated president, Mr. Alok Sharma, and other ministers from other countries, discussing with the young representatives here present the manifesto in order to really get concrete commitments from governments on the way forward. So I'm very hopeful for the future, and this is what we are focusing on right now to enhance youth participation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Roberta, for the introduction and also for sharing with us the plans for this afternoon and the good news of this Youth for Climate Manifesto that is being developed. And also thank you for pointing out already two quite important keywords to our conversation today. You mentioned concrete and continued dialogue. I think these, of course, are ingredients that are essential to make sure that we really have a proper process in developing this inclusion of youth into climate policy making, but also implementation, of course. And maybe I would like to hear now from someone that is a youth representative. So Zihan, please tell me, in your perspective, who are the actors involved in 20 years in implementing and defining climate policy, and what is the role of youth in that process?
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's great to be here, and I would really love to share my experience on behalf of Yango, the youth constituency to the UNFCCC. I also like to thank the speakers, of course, for their contributions, in particular Italy for hosting the pre-COP summit. A lot of us were there in Italy in person, so really enjoyed that experience as well. To address your question, I think it's a good place to start by recognizing the importance of why youth should be included in policy decision-making process in the first place. And I think there are two key reasons why we as youths and young people should be engaged meaningfully. The first is that youths will be essentially inheriting the world in 10 years, in 20 years, and they will be facing the brunt of the impacts of the climate crisis, whether that's rising sea levels, whether that's a changing climate, or whether that's any of the issues that will be pointed out at the negotiation rooms today. Youths in general have been disproportionately impacted by the impacts that climate change have brought to the world. And we think that it is important for youths to be given a seat at the table when it comes to these negotiations. The second reason why we in Yango, and in particular me as part of the cities working group, would really like to emphasize is that youths have very innovative and creative ideas to contribute when it comes to urban policy decision making. One of the most important partners we have, ICLE included, but also C40 cities, aim to achieve is to really bring youths with mayors around the world to collectively innovate for ideas in terms of urban climate policy decision making. And we see that when we are able to bring together stakeholders from different generations, but also different backgrounds, we are able to come to a better understanding of the issues we face collectively, but also drive the process of coming to solutions. Some of the key ideas in urban climate policy, for example, decarbonization, digital transformation, as well as blue-green infrastructure, are all initiatives that have been supported, spearheaded, and led by youth representatives from Yango and beyond Yango. And we think that it is for this reason that youths should be actively and meaningfully included in urban decision-making process, but also that youths should be thought of not only as a representative or as a victim of the climate crisis, but also an agent of change that is able to contribute their voice, perspective, and proposals to the table. And in fact, just to finish off, we have in Yango been coming up with the Global Youth Statement in parallel with the Milan Manifesto, where we bring together youths from around 135 countries around the world to come to a consensus about what it means to be a young people facing the climate crisis today, and how we are going to collectively mobilize in face of the pressing challenges brought forth in front of us. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity here today, and I would thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for the introduction and also for the very positive message. I think what you just said about the role of youth in spearheading change, being a leader, an agent of change, and the fact that you are not just the one that are, of course, affected by climate change, but the one that want to bring forward innovative solutions and new ideas on how to tackle it. I think this is a very strong and powerful message that we should definitely keep into account during our conversation, but also share with all of our policymakers to really consider for the future. So we now would like to move on and to hear a little bit also from Joseph from, let's say, the European level side. So Joseph, how do you feel that 20 years from now, who are the actors involved in the definition of policy, and what is the role of youth from a European perspective?
Well, thank you very much for your invitation for this panel. Today I'm from Priorat, is a rural area in Tarragona, in Catalonia, in Spain. I am farmer here, and my work is representative of the agri-food sector in the Economic and Social Committee in Europe. The most important for my institution is the work and consensus and global issues for the social, economic, and environmental issues for the young people. Also, the first question is introducing in the debate in the opinions, the work is the opinions and consensus for the European Commission and European Parliament and other institutions, the young people in this process. That is basic for the next time. At the concrete moment, the play in the Green Deal and two strategies, biodiversity and farm to fork, is the work is today and the immediately future. In these issues, the open questions is anticipate the situation. Well, the decarbonization required unprecedented transformations. Maybe the civil society in Europe is compromised in this success. Also, the Green Deal and Social Deal is fundamental for the sustainable economic we need in the future. On the other hand, to ensure a proper and robust civil society participation. The future is not only of the government and the other issues. The role of civil society is the time in the European and Economic Social Committee. 329 members is renewable 5 years ago. There's the women, young, farmers, professions, consumers, industrials, workers, etc. But in the years to come, should probably reinforce the relations and links and relevant actors and new actors in the society. Is very, very important. Open the key for the incorporate the new society in this process of compromise for the year or future and 20 years. Also is a particular objective of the European Economic and Social Committee and the role of civil society. That is my first approach in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for telling us a little bit more about what is the vision for the European Economic and Social Committee. And I think your point about the role and the robust role and participation for civil society as a key ingredient is indeed an essential item that should always be included while we are talking about a challenge. It is indeed unprecedented. So we really need all hands on deck to deliver on the mission that we are putting ourselves in front of us for the future. Maybe I would like to continue then to stay with our European Economic and Social Committee and ask Sophie to share her perspective as the youth representative. I understand, Sophie, that there is quite a bit going on right now in trying to include, of course, youth within the European Economic and Social Committee, and that you have some also dialogues that are coming up together with different commissioners. So things seem to pick up. But what is your vision in 20 years from now, Sophie?
Thank you very much for the introduction and also for the opportunity to speak at this wonderful panel. Well, 20 years from now, Europe will have only 9 years left to achieve climate neutrality. And much of what people will have to deal with then depends on how we're managing the green transition today and over the next few years. And I would envision a Europe in which climate protection and inclusivity are really mainstream. So that means all the decisions that are taken in any field and any thematic area are evaluated on their climate impact and how inclusive they are, because this is the only way that we can ensure to live in a system that respects both human rights and the planet. We cannot think these things without each other. And a system that also acknowledges our common but differentiated responsibility in achieving a carbon neutral and sustainable world. So Europe also will need to collaborate with global partners to achieve this. And hopefully by then we'll be more on track to achieve the 1.5 degree target as we are now. And to be really sustainable, the Green Deal must be a social deal that leaves no one behind during the green transition and doesn't create permanent losers. And currently, EU decision-making processes on climate are still lacking voices of those groups that are particularly vulnerable to the climate crisis and are underrepresented. This includes youth, but not only, also women or people with chronic health conditions or disabilities. And this still too often leads to unintended effects of policies that are designed to be sustainable. So we need to make sure that in the future, these groups are involved from the start, from the creation of the policies, and not just consulted when the policies are already half done. And I think the EESC can have a crucial role in this, as, if you want, the guardian of this robust civil society participation, because it is the voice of organized civil society. And by this participation, the EESC can contribute to not only strengthening the democratic legitimacy of the EU by enabling the civil society to really express their views, but also make these policies more effective, because those who are affected by them are involved in the process. So the EESC in the future needs to make sure that really all of society is included in these dialogues, and can start forging stronger relationships with the relevant actors of society who are maybe already represented, but underrepresented, and this includes youth. Youth will face the full force of climate change, and we must play a central role in the production of environmental policies. So the European Green Deal must be built with youth. And there are already many consultations going on, as you said, which is really great. But for the future, we are hoping that these dialogues can be more structured, and these ways to engage with young people, they need to be permanent, they need to be inclusive, they need to be representative and transparent. So youth organizations need to know what happens with the input that is given by young people. Young people have great ideas, and we want to see them implemented on the European level. We also hope that the European Union and the member states will place more emphasis on education to really empower young people, to give them also the tools to contribute to a carbon neutral and circular economy, because we want to be able to take on green jobs, and we want to have the skills to contribute as effectively as we can. So for the future, I would like to see young people not to just be consultants to give opinions on specific policy issues, but to be representatives at all main meetings in this regard, and to really get the role that they deserve as initiators and drivers of change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophia, for your remarks. You also raised this point of the unintended effects. I think we heard a lot about benefits and co-benefits of climate action, but we haven't spoken that much about unintended effects. And these are definitely an essential component to make sure that we are getting our policy right. I also think that your idea to have participation as a key indicator of our performance when it comes to delivering climate action is an essential component that should be part of our KPIs, of our key performance indicators, when it comes to really talk about impactful measures that are being implemented on the ground. I know Roberta has to leave, so please take the floor. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Sorry. Well, just to thank, thanks again for the invitation. I'm sorry that I have to leave, but before leaving, I want to mention that about education, which Sophia was mentioning just now, and sorry, not to make an advertisement, there is going to be a big event in plenary, in plenary room number 2, Pen room. It will be an event on education and environment led by the Minister of Education of Italy and the Secretary of State on Education of UK, together with Minister Cingolani and many other ministers for to present again concrete commitments on education. So sorry, at 4 o'clock this afternoon today. Yes, it's an open event, so you are all invited in the plenary. It's plenary number 2, Pen room. And sorry again, but I have to leave. I want actually also to thank the mayor of Recife, who I know I met already, and he kindly participated in the webinar series we hosted in leading to the Youth for Climate event. Knowing he's he's also a representative of youth. So thank you again for the invitation. It would be a pleasure really to stay, and see you soon.
Thank you, Roberta, and good work today. You have a challenging work ahead of you, so thank you. We look forward to seeing more how youth can be integrated further into climate policy. So thank you for being with us. And you already did a little bit of my job introducing already the mayor of Recife. So I would like to hear from you, Joao, a little bit about what is your vision in 20 years from now? You are the youngest mayor of the capital cities in Brazil. So you are somehow a little bit also a youth representative. So it is possible to be part of the planning, implementation, and be part of this process of policy development. So what is your vision and what is the role of youth?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is João Campos, and I am the mayor of Recife, the youngest mayor of all state capitals in Brazil. And I'm delighted to be addressing you today and to feel the energy of the youth. In 20 years, I want to be able to tell the youth that our generation fought and won, that the youth of today launched a collective and global reaction to prevent the complete destruction of our planet. Also, 20 years from now, I'm sure that the climate agenda will continue to depend on the strength and violence of civil society. Governments will only get it right if they engage social movements, campaigns, and the adoptions and mitigation actions. And I'm sure Recife gives its contribution. We have the experience of encourage environmental collectives as a governmental dialogue strategy, and we want to scale this action on a global level. I see my city, Recife, 20 years from now as a park city, the result of the long-term strategy that we are applying today with the construction of the largest urban linear park in Latin America, Parque Capibaribe. A new concept of city emerged, more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable, made for people and in harmony with the environment. Finally, 20 years from now, what I want to say to my people is that the future has arrived. The future of clean transport with absolutely priority for activity mobility, the future of decarbonization economy using fully renewable energy matrix, the future of justice and equity with difference to human rights and guarantee of dignity for every person, the future of resilient cities with an inclusive and sustainable urban environment, the future of intergenerational solidarity with the dream that is shared together between present and future generations.
Thank you very much for your inspiring thoughts about how we can really look into the future and to see how we can shape our cities to become more resilient, of course, but also more inclusive. And you mentioned some of the projects you are implementing. And I think indeed, when we talk about climate action, we focus, of course, on the environmental benefits, but the social aspects, of course, also the regeneration and the social inclusion that you can trigger with these processes. It's an essential component of the important success that we have to deliver upon with our climate action. So we now travel back not only in time, but also in space virtually, and we come back to Europe. And it's my pleasure now to give the floor to Imanol to tell us a little bit more about the vision of Vitoria-Gasteiz.
Thank you, Georgia. Does it work? Can you hear me? Yeah. Great. Well, first, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in such an interesting event, giving the voice to youth. I'm already touching the upper end of what probably we call as youth. Maybe I already exceeded it. So I'll put myself a little bit within the boundaries for this call and involve myself also as part of the youth. I work and I represent here a city, a European city. And I would like to give a little bit of a different angle to my answer to the question, right? I mean, the justification of why the youth should be involved has already been covered very well by my colleagues. And the critical thought that I wanted to share here with the panelists is, okay, so say, for example, youth in our city, right? We probably have a few champions among the youth of our city who are active participating in such events and debates. But My assumption is, what I observe is that the big majority of the youth, they are there. They are not actively participating and empowered, and maybe with the tools that Sophie was referring to, and are just not so active in the scene, right? So as a city, what are the tools, what are the structures, what are the measures that one can put forward to also activate that big silent youth, right? Indicators that we observe, right? I mean, I had the chance to live in different European cities, and I compare with indicators that I made myself on how can we compare actually where is the youth, in which city is the youth more active, and what are the aspects that you can look at to tell, oh, look, the youth in Copenhagen is more active than the youth in London. And something that I always look at is, okay, who goes and buys to producers, to farmers, to vegetable markets, right? What is the average age of a consumer in such a market? I see markets in France where I would dare to say that the average age is 35. Whereas in our city, the average age of a buyer, of a consumer in a local producer's market is probably 55 to 60. So this awareness of, oh, let's buy local, I don't see the youth there. Vegetarian diets, this is still an imminent reality in our city, whereas in many other countries in Europe, this is cool, this is the trend, right? So yeah, how do we activate that youth, right? Another issue that we see also is, from my organization, we organize a lot of activities that bring people very close to nature. And the average age of consumers of these activities is beyond 35 to 45. We have very few participants who are under 35. Why is that? Gender. Gender is also something that strikes me constantly. Every time we organize a debate, we organize some cultural debate on environmental, climate change, etc. Most of the participants, I don't know, and this is a question for the panelists and maybe also for the public, most of the participants that we get in our city are women. Men do not participate so much. Is this also happening in your places? And why do you think so? So I'm bringing more questions than maybe answers, but I think one starts with questions, right? Preparing a strategic plan, but I do have one answer and one observation that we also had, and that is every time we let young people organize an event, participation rates are always much higher than when we as the City Hall organize an event. So for us, this is a very interesting outcome. And it's also, we are trying to implement that much more. Whenever we organize something, let the youth organize it or co-organize it with them. Then we get much better results. Yeah.
Thank you very much. You started asking some tough questions, which I think is what we are trying to do today in any case, and also giving some solutions. I think this reflection that you just made around how, for example, organizing an event together with the youth, you managed to have more people attending it is actually quite interesting. Maybe also trying to answer your question, I would like to go to Zihan now. And we were talking about how do we activate this big silent youth? That was the question from Imanol, of course. But mine would be, we kind of talked about our desired future now, how we see it happening in 20 years from now. What is needed now at this moment in order to reach that desirable future scenario in your point of view?
Thank you very much for that question. I think it's, and thank you for sharing as well about the need to include youths meaningfully in co-organizing events and spearheading initiatives. I have two main responses to the question about how we are going to get there. You know, the mayor talked about, you know, specific visions that he has for his city, and, you know, our panelists here all shared about their ambitions. I think there are 2 points that I think from Yango, the youth constituency, we would really like to bring across. The first is that, and it is because we are at the multi-level action pavilion, there needs to be action coordinated between cities, between regions, and between sub-regions. And this is a very important aspect for multiple reasons. The first is that cities and subnational communities have so much in common with each other that need to be shared through knowledge sharing, through the sharing of best practices, and through communication and collaboration. I come from the city of Shanghai, which is just very well in the banner there. And there's so much in common with where I'm staying, which is in London, in terms of, for example, increased vulnerability to the impacts of climate change, most significantly the impact of flooding. And there is so much potential that can be uncovered through these collaborations on an urban level because of the similarities that urban communities face. For example, many of the cities in which I live or have been through share a variety of characteristics, such as, for example, high population density, increased connectivity, as well as other shared characteristics. And it is because of this that there is so much synergies to be developed if cities and urban communities are able to exchange knowledge, but also to share what works in their context and what wouldn't work in their context. And I think that this is one of the key reasons why we need action, not only, from governments on in international platforms such as COP26, but also in terms of bringing local governments together, local governments that share similar problems and concerns so that they can collectively collaborate in search of solutions. And I think finally, another point that I just had on the issue of how we get there based on the ambitions that we all have is the nature of youth inclusion in policymaking. As I think my colleague Sophia said just now, when it comes to getting youth voices to European institutions, I personally, and this is the views of our working group in Yango as well, that youths should be included not only as a tokenistic kind of representation at the very end of the policy making process to say that we have consulted youth, and then leave it at that. Rather, what we envision, and that's important if we want to get to that ambition in 10 or 20 years, is that youths should be involved from the very start when we are trying to set the agenda of what exactly we want to achieve in 10, 20 years. That is crucial from a climate justice point of view, because the futurization of youth, by which I mean the taking of decisions by adults in the room who will be less affected by climate change than the youths, has a very significant impact on the ability of youth to be able to adapt to the challenges of climate change in 10 or in 20 years. So if we are able to allow youths and enable youths through climate education and various other platforms to be involved from the very start of the climate policy making process, from setting the agenda to actually co-creating spaces for dialogue, and then finally to policy implementation, then we can truly say that we have achieved our ambition of youth inclusion, but also being able to kickstart some of these excellent and creative ideas that youth have brought to the table. And I think that's a good point to consider when it comes to how we want to reach the ambition in the future.
Thank you very much for your perspective. I think what you said about different cities located in different parts of the world, but somehow sharing the same challenges, this is a very important point, because it also opens up a lot of questions about how can we use each other's ideas to improve what we are doing on the ground, and to also change a little bit the way that we innovate and we approach solutions. I think that's definitely crucial. And this idea of creating more stable platform is something that generally has been discussed, especially in this pavilion in the past few days, because it's a similar approach that also cities sometimes, local governments, subnational governments are facing, the challenge of having a constant dialogue, not just a reaction to something that is being decided. I think this is very important to have an aligned policy that can be rolled out on the ground with the support, of course, of the entirety of the community. So thank you for your perspective. And I would like maybe to ask the same question now also to Joseph. So what do you think, Joseph, from your perspective, is needed in order to reach the desired scenario that we just talked about a few minutes ago?
Well, thank you, Georgia. Two questions, maybe. One question is a situated debate in the local and the territorial area and governance. Maybe the last opinion for the Economic and Social Committee 2 weeks ago, work in the integral development urban and rural areas, sustainable, of course. But this is a position of the need for the future, a territorial contract. After the COVID pandemic, in Europe, in old Europe, the urban areas need rural aspects for the environment, for the playing of the out of the cities, etc. In Scotland, an example of that contract, territorial contract. Another towns might be in Milano, in Toulouse. We need a participative contract, rural, urban, for the local markets, local producers, etc., and integrate these rural areas young people of the urban areas for your environmental question. That is a question interesting for me to the level of the municipalities of the contract with the urban and rural areas. Maybe in other contexts, in the immediately future, the other opinion of the European Economic and Social Committee I presented 5 main recommendations for the governance, of course. The implementation of a strong mindful youth engagement at all levels as union making decisions. This question is drafting in the proposals and initiative and monitoring and follow-up for especially for the climate and sustainability policies, is the priority of this question, of introducing the opinion and the control of the young people. First question. Second question, a more inclusive, I put young people at the heart of the engagement process and beyond and meetings and more processes and calls of consultations. This question is concrete for the program of the meetings of the year, and introducing this opinion of young people on the more out level, President Timmermans with the Commission, for the Parliament, etc. But it needs to establish the youth climate and sustainable roundtables permanent by host in the European Economic and Social Committee in collaboration with the European Commission and the European Parliament for this integrated position. The inclusion of young delegates today in the official European Union delegation is very interesting, but maybe Sofia is a member most important in the delegation. In the European Economic and Social Delegation, the 6 members, maybe Sofia is the best important for the need to actuate immediately, and the young people is maybe the future immediately. I'm 63 years old, also is not my but then also 20 years ago is Sofia, is your generation, the work and these issues. The inclusion, the young boys and your opinions and participation is fundamental immediately started in the process of the governance. That is the intention of the European Economic and Social Committee, and this is the proposal in this opinion maybe for the internal governance of the institution. Thank you, Georgia.
Thank you very much, Joseph. I think the fact that this year, I think for the first time, if I'm not wrong, you had the opportunity to include as part of your delegation to COP a youth representative is a remarkable step in the right direction, I would say, to really include in a transparent manner youth throughout the process, and thinking about youth also as an agent of change in connecting rural and urban areas. And you use also this opportunity to really embrace these 2 different parts of basically 2 sides of the same coin when it comes to response to climate action. When we want to roll out integrated measure, I think it's also a wonderful opportunity to really use youth benefit from youth innovation and the possibility to really engage also these different areas. I would like now to ask the same question to Joao. So my question again for you would be, what do we need to do now to achieve this desirable future from your perspective?
it's necessary to start talking about how Recife is facing present in order to have a future with support of clay and urban leads. According to the IPCC, Recife is the 60th most vulnerable city to climate change in the world. This is why we can't wait for others to act when it comes to raise ambition. My city was the first in South America to declare a climate emergency in 2019, but declarations only go so far. That's why we decided to act. A year later, we decided that our city will be neutral climate by 2050 and developed a concrete action plan to reach these targets. Most recently, we also joined the Race to Zero. For global change, local actions is crucial. It is with leadership for local governments combined with the protagonism of youth that we can be even more ambitious and more committed to saving life on the planet. This desire to transform has to be channeled into concrete actions that demands multi-stakeholders engagement. Local governments and their networks are essential to drive change, but they need the support of national governments, international and multilateral bodies. We need to bring everyone to the table. We have to include business and non-governmental organizations and speak directly to people. It is the especially young people, women and minorities who are the real engines of transformations. Recife is one of the main shining examples of local and regional governments around the world that are taking ambitious actions. As a local government, we want to emphasize the important contributions we make and want to make around the world. The time for multi-level actions has come. Our capacity for dialogue is fundamental, as this will be that will engage people and make different actions sit at the same table. Besides, it takes courage to do it differently. There are solutions that are still being discovered. And if we don't have the will to innovate, we will not be able to contain the effects of climate change.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. And I definitely think that this idea of the community as the best cradle to innovate and to find solution is something that we should continue to keep in mind. And I would like now to move a little bit from this point of what we still need to do and what is needed in order to achieve the scenario that we started from, and look into what is happening now to really support this process for continuing and to go into the direction of this desired future that we have painted at the beginning. So maybe I would like to start with Sophia. Sophia, if you can share with us from your point of view, from your experience, what is already happening that should make us hope that we are going in the right direction?
Yes, thank you for the question. So I've mentioned before that there is a need to have more structural involvement of young people. And I believe the ESC is already starting to address this problem. There is a dialogue going on now about how to implement youth engagement and how to enable young people to engage in decision-making processes at the EU level more structurally and in a more formal way beyond these mere consultations and ad hoc meetings that only happen once or twice. This started in February 2020 and involved both relevant stakeholders from the EU institutions as well as youth representatives. And that was really great because the youth representatives were there from the beginning to share their ideas on how they want to be involved. And this then led to a webinar in June that was reflecting on these building blocks for new structured approaches and provided also input for the ESC own initiative opinion. So these ideas are taken into account and are moving towards implementation. The SDO of the ESC has also included the need to include aspects of climate justice and the commitment to amplify the voices of young people and their organizations into their work programs, having this as like a statutory document, including these aspects is also a big step forward. The NAT section of the ESC has done the same. And then we've already mentioned that this year there's for the first time a youth delegate included in the delegation to the COP, which is a really nice initiative and could hopefully also be extended to other missions that are related to climate and other youth relevant policies. The EESC regularly seeks input from youth organizations for opinions related to climate and sustainability. This has already been going on for longer. And in this regard, cooperates very closely with Generation Climate Europe. I'm originally from an organization that's also part of this coalition. GC, it's the largest climate coalition of youth-led networks on the European level and has 381 member organizations in 46 countries and represents 20 million young people. And I think this coalition is also quite relevant because it facilitates also dialogue amongst the youth representatives and youth organizations themselves. Youth is very diverse, and sometimes it can be a problem to get stuck in your own bubble. I'm a member of AG, the European Students Forum, and it's very relevant to have this organization that is basically consisting of just university students to discuss with the wide range of youth voices and then bundle them up to represent them towards the European level, because then we can include a wider range of views and much bigger input that really takes everyone into account.
Thank you, Sophia, for your thoughts. And it's actually remarkable. You were talking about representation of 20 million young people. It's an incredible amount of young people being connected with one another and trying to, you're saying we differentiated voices, of course, and with some need for coordination and perspective, but definitely coming together to at least pursue specific goals of being part of the dialogue, being part of the discussion and wanting to make change. So thank you also for sharing these numbers. I think it's impressive also to remind ourselves how much youth power there is out there and the willingness of wanting to do things and to change. So thank you very much for that. Imanol, I would like to ask you the same question. So you gave us a little bit of a teaser of what is happening and what is not happening in Vitoria, of course, but tell us a little bit about what do you think it's already ongoing to make us hope for the desired future that we are painting together here today.
Yes. Okay, so again, I'll do a little bit of a zoom in and a much more local perspective. At the end of the day, we see the work on a specific city where we are involved in. And I think I like to make the distinction between two very clear points. One is the structure, the organizational infrastructure that an institution can have to allow youth to participate and to influence policies, etc. And the other one would be how active is the youth population, right? Because, and maybe even this one is, in my opinion, much more interesting when it comes to, wow, as a city, if we have, say, more than 50% of the youth population activated and demanding such an infrastructure, that's for me like a great success, right? You might have, say, for example, we have 250,000 inhabitants in our city. I'm going to make up these numbers. 20% are probably under 35. So that would imply around 50,000 young people. Fridays for Future has 5 members. As an indicator, I don't know if this is big, if this is small, because I don't know the numbers for a different city, but there are 5 and only girls, right? So then I mean, if the situation would be, well, we have 50,000 young people in the city and 20,000 of them are activated in an organization, doesn't matter if it's not Friday for Future, but they are active in some sort of environmental climate change organization, that's also an indicator of success when it comes to youth, right? It's not just the structures that we can offer for them to participate in policy implementation, but also how active is the population. So we are also working on that level, right? And there, some interesting initiatives that we put forward this year are, for example, along the lines that Sophie mentioned of empowering through education. We created a very concrete and beautiful and successful initiative, which was an escape room where all the steps that you had to make were problems related to climate change that you had to solve, right? So this had very good participation and was very well accepted by young people. It was young people who demanded this, and the surveys were very positive. So that was a very clear example of, hey, if you approach this problem with innovative solutions or innovative alternatives, such as an escape room, it works. Another aspect is building also communication channels with young people, right? We, in our city, what we are working on is creating, I don't know how to call them, young messengers, so to say, right? Like initiatives or actions that the public institution prepares. How can you make them penetrate the young population? We count with several young messengers who work on sharing them in their networks, etc. So this is also working nicely. We still have the gender issue. I'm very happy to hear answers from the other panelists, if this is also a reality in their case. Maybe from what I heard, you might be working on a much higher level to see a distinction or a hint here. But for us, this is clear. Women participate and are much more active than men. And we really want to understand why is this and what can we do to bring that balance back to normal. And as I mentioned again before, we are starting to co-create much more with these little but motivated young organizations that we have in our city. So co-created initiatives always tend to show much higher participation rates.
Thank you very much for your perspective again from Vitoria. I think this idea of building communication channels that can reach out to the different types of youth that you are hoping to engage is definitely quite important. And I believe that we actually have a question going a little bit on that direction. And I would like to call on my colleague, Sylvia, who is joining us online, to read some of the questions that are coming through our channel. So Sylvia, hi, hello. I understand that there are quite a few colleagues that have been actively posting online. So can you tell us a little bit what questions have been coming through?
Absolutely, it would be my pleasure. And thank you for all our speakers for the very interesting contributions. And most of the comments are actually about this. So thank you for the insight that has been provided already so far. And just as a side note to reinforce the question that we just got from the speaker from Vitoria Gasta, is all comments are coming from ladies. So apparently also online participation in this case is a bit biased towards not very like gender balance numbers. But I have a question here, building on what you just presented, maybe on the idea of having innovative ways of engagement. You were sharing this idea of the escape room in order to raise awareness. But there is a question here coming from Annika, who is connected from Copenhagen, that is pointing out on the formal classical way of participation and the fact that they might sometimes be a bit old school. So she's asking, what are your ideas, your examples, if you have any, on how to reshape the formats, how those different generations can be actually breached in the policy making at the local level, but also maybe at the higher level.
Thank you, Sylvia. I wonder if any of our panelists would like to volunteer to share some ideas in this regard. Maybe then I would ask maybe our representative from the youth, if you have some guidelines that you want to share in terms of what to consider in, you know, rethinking the model and type of engagement approaches.
Sorry, and thank you for that question. I think it's a very interesting one that we need to consider. When it comes to youth engagement in climate action, I think we need to recognize that youth is not a homogeneous block, that there is significant variations in terms of the interests, concerns, and the expertise that youths bring to the table. And the reason why I start with this is that Yango, obviously, we are the youth constituency to the UNFCCC, but we also represent more than 1,000 youth NGOs and 10,000 youth individuals, each bring their own perspectives, expertise, and needs to the conversation. And so I think that we need youth inclusion in both formal and informal ways. Formal because we ultimately do need youths to be at the decision-making and the negotiation tables as part of, for example, youth delegations, as Sophia and Joseph were sharing just now, in order to be able to make and implement those decisions together with other world leaders and delegates at COP26 and in other international summits. So definitely these formal modes and mechanisms of participation is key to ensure that youths have that voice, and also not only the voice, but also the ability, the leverage, and the mandate to make those decisions. But going back to the point about other modes of engagement, I actually think that that is very much key in terms of mobilizing more youths to get involved in this discussion. Clearly, we cannot have all youths represented at COP26, much less in other international summits. But what we have found in Yangon and what we continue to find in Yangon is that youths participate most actively, and they also bring the most innovative ideas when there are these non-formal creative modes of engagement. It was mentioned about the idea about escape rooms, and I just like to share that other modes and mechanisms that youths very much participate very actively in include one of our key demands here, in fact, in a global youth statement, which is through arts, culture, and heritage. And the reason why this is such a key, one of the key, modes of engagement is really because youths in general are such an expressive as well as, creative block of individuals who very much have their own ways of sharing their climate demands. Policy, of course, is one of them, but also much of our Yangon team is involved in, for example, climate campaigning with urban city councils, and also, for example, sharing their climate demands and, in fact, their climate anxiety through different modes of art, music, and other forms of arts and culture. And I think that what we need to do is we need to unite different streams of engagement, both formal and informal, in order to come to some consensus about what youths in general demand from mayors, from urban councils, and from governments. We need to give this space for youths to be able to express their demands in different forms, but at the same time, we need to make sure that ultimately we have a unifying youth voice that is able to be represented and articulated in decision-making processes.
Thank you very much. I really like this idea of having two streams of engagement, these formal approaches that are really needed to entrench the priorities and these participatory processes into the dialogues that we are having in shaping strategic implementation of our climate action, but also this informal engagement and this art component that, it's also bringing forward our more human side to a certain extent, and they can really also help us in trying to find innovative solutions and to connect with one another on a larger scale. I don't know if Sophia wants to add anything to this question, for example, or if you have any ideas of some innovative ways that you have been involved or that you would like to see councils all over the world, all over Europe to implement to bring youth together.
Thank you. I think a lot of great points have already been made, and I very much agree that we need both this formal way of engagement and the informal way, because it helps to mobilize more youth and spark interest. And also, I think informal ways of engagement are often a lot easier to foster dialogue. The local level in municipalities is very, very suitable for this, because for a lot of young people, it is more accessible to just start a project in their own community. It's also clearer for them what the problems might be there. And it's also easier, I think, to get in touch across all the generations at this level at first. During the past year with the pandemic, we also had to create a lot of more innovative solutions to reach our audiences and educate people, get in touch with them on discussions. And we actually also had an escape room online that was dealing with sustainability issues. So this idea seems to be quite popular, and it's always getting a lot of positive responses. So I think, yeah, gamification also of these issues for young people is something that they really appreciate and make some issues like climate change more approachable. But at the same time, when we say we also need formal engagement, I think one of the most classical ways of formally engaging for young people, and one of the easiest ones, is also to vote. And if you look at surveys across Europe, across the different countries, young people at a huge majority are following elections and are following party programs very attentively. More than 80% are invested in elections on the European and at the national level. But when you look at the results, when people are asked how are our interests represented, then a majority of more than 60% says the things I'm most invested in are not present in the party programs enough. And I think so also politicians really need to make sure to include these issues that young people are mobilizing for, to include them in party programs and propose policies for this. So we need a lot more dialogue between policymakers, young people, and all these different actors in society to really make people feel represented and heard.
Thank you very much, Sophia, also for this overview about the following politics rolling out both at European and at local level, and the power that having the opportunity also to say what the priorities are, what kind of priorities you have, and what is included really in the plan of the different political forces on the ground. It's interesting to see the attention of youth going into that level of detail and to really be trying to participate as much as possible into these processes as well. So I would like to ask, since we have still a little bit of time, if there is any question coming from the room. I don't see anyone raising their hands here in person. There might be someone online that has a question, but while Sylvia pulls up the different questions that are coming through, maybe I have one myself, a little bit of a tricky one. I'm going to be play devil's advocate here for a moment. We have heard a lot about how youth wants to be engaged. We also heard from Emmanuel how there is a silent majority that is not engaged at the same time. So this is probably a question that you might have heard, I think, probably from others, but are we really sure the youth wants to be included into these processes? And what type of youth wants to be engaged into these processes? So I don't know, Zian, it's a bit of a tricky question. I know the youth wants to be included, but I would like to hear your thoughts on this.
Thank you for the question. I appreciate the angle from which the question is being asked. I think it is definitely true that this generation of youths, but just youths in general, are waking up to the reality of climate change. They are waking up to the reality of climate change, but they are also very active in terms of contributing solutions to climate change, whether it's through what we discussed, so formal or informal modes of engagement. Young people are continuing and I think increasingly involved in climate action, but also in climate policy. I think when it comes to the silent majority that was being mentioned just now, the issue is not so much that youths do not want to be engaged, because from the perspective of Youngo and the young people we work with, that is absolutely the case, that young people want to be involved. But I think the issue lies and the challenge lies in how we are able to engage these silent majorities who have ideas, who have perspectives, and who have needs, but do not have the platform or do not have the motivation or the incentives to speak out and advocate for them. I think that is the key challenge when it comes to mobilizing youth, because oftentimes there is limited space and limited platforms to amplify youth voices. COP26 and the multi-level action pavilion being one of the best ways to amplify youth voices. But I do think that it is still a work in progress to ensure that youths that are not traditionally involved in these spaces related to climate actually have this, have this incentive and have this platform to speak out, because it is when they join events like this, when they're able to interact with across generations, across space, and across time, that they feel that their contributions are unique, that their contributions matter, and that their contributions will actually concretely and sustainably be part of the solution making process. And I think if there's one message that Yango or our team in the official youth constituency of the UNFCCC wishes to make, it is really that young people have significant potential that needs to be unlocked by mayors, by city councils, by governments in order to be meaningfully engaged. And I think this is a imperative and a priority that is being increasingly recognized by government and by all key stakeholders. And we really hope that it can continue in this direction so as to involve all young people, not just certain segments of the population, but all young people who wish to speak out, who like to speak out, and who would like to be given that platform to contribute their ideas.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. I'm just thinking now, Emmanuel, you want to unlock the potential of youth in Vitoria. You clearly said it. So maybe you have a question as well for our panelists here on what you can do to help. What kind of help can they give you to make sure that you can unlock more this potential?
I mean, I like the answer that my colleague here gave about first offering the possibilities for at least that part of the youth that wants to participate to be able to participate, right? This would be the low-hanging fruit. I mean, if you have a minority, if the minority of the youth also finds difficulties constantly to be able to participate, that's not going to attract more youth into the game, right? So I take that message, and I think it's I mean, working in a public institution, that would be that's a message for such an institution, right? Like, okay, let's slowly work the infrastructure, the scaffolding for the youth to be able to climb and penetrate in a way, and hope, and that's my wish, that would then contribute to increase that share of youth that is empowered, active, and sticks to its principles, right? And that would be, for me, the wish to then see also mirrored in the society, right? When suddenly, when we look at the young population and we see that the behaviors are different, that people start deciding not to buy a car when actually they can afford it, but they don't buy a car, or when they start having at least twice per week a vegetarian dish in the restaurant, and these things are starting to pop up. I see different speeds among the cities, and the questions that I ask from an environmental think tank perspective is, what can we do to speed up also that, right? Those indicators and those behavior changes. But I mean, we don't need to answer all the questions here in 1 hour. I guess this is a long route, and what I'm happy about is to make the contacts with the colleagues in the panel so we can follow up on these questions together. Yeah.
Thank you very much. As we grow close to the end of our session, I would also like to give the opportunity to João to share his thoughts.
I will speak in Portuguese and Bianca will translate. Primeiro, eu gostaria de agradecer a todos que participaram do painel de maneira presencial e de maneira remota, e aos organizadores, especialmente ao ICLEI.
First of all, I would like to thank for all the panelists and the spectators of the session, and also thank to the organizers, especially ICLEI, Local Governance for Sustainability.
É muito bom poder ver a juventude reunida representando as cidades globais, representando os movimentos, representando ONGs e falando de ações concretas que possam mobilizar outras pessoas para defender o meio ambiente e que possam impactar não apenas localmente, mas globalmente.
It's very good to see the youth being represented by politicians, NGOs, and other organizations here at COP26. So it's good to see that we are mobilizing this action towards and helping to drive the results that we need from this conference.
Antes de concluir, eu queria só lembrar uma ação que a gente está fazendo no Recife, muito importante, que é colocar dentro do currículo escolar de todas as escolas de nossa rede, para mais de 90 mil alunos, a obrigatoriedade da disciplina de mudanças climáticas. trazendo dentro do ambiente da escola a discussão e a valorização deste tema como de responsabilidade de todos os jovens do Recife.
As a final thing that I would like to bring is that in Recife, we are making a movement to put climate change education in all public schools of the city. So I think it's the first step towards it's a signal that we really care about climate change and that we believe that it should be discussed on the very ground of the children.
Só unindo as ações dentro da educação e mobilizando os jovens, a gente consegue construir o futuro que a gente tanto deseja. Eu tenho 27 anos, estou como prefeito da minha cidade, mas além de governar uma cidade grande do Brasil, eu sinto que a gente representa todos os jovens recifenses, pernambucanos e brasileiros que sonham com um país e com um mundo que possa respeitar o meio ambiente e verdadeiramente fazer bem feito pelas gerações que ainda virão. Então, muito obrigado.
Well, I'm 27 years. I represent not Recife, the young people of the state of Pernambuco, but all of the Brazilian youth and hopefully the global youth that it's engaged, it's political engaging in this climate change fight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, both to Joao and of course to Blanca for this interpretation on the spot. Don't worry. Thank you very much for being with us. We are also getting close to our end of our session, but thank you again. But I would also like to give the opportunity to Joseph to share his final thoughts from his perspective after this conversation. Joseph, is there anything that you really thought that it was interesting and you take home with you?
Thank you, Georgia, and thank you, everybody. That is an interesting panel. Maybe the conclusion, European Economic and Social Committee is a house of dialogue, but need the young people for the future immediately. Also in the sustainability and climate issues and other questions. The SDO is the very important compromise for the population. But in the future, is sustainable or not possible? That question is need implemented and concrete questions. Maybe 4 round tables in the European Economic and Social Committee with the Parliament, with the Commission, with the speak and the possibility of the participation of everybody is the clear for future. The answer and the solutions is implemented and continuous, but is not possible to stop. Is step by step. I need work and cross with more explaining that the position of the young people is fundamental for this question. The all people need support this position, but is need back to it immediately in the time is the time of the act, is not the time of the speak and blah blah blah. Is the concrete questions, that is the time of the young people, is the time of the social and the popular discussion of within the democracy, of course, but the sustainability and climate change is the question today fundamental for the future. That is the position of the Committee Economic and Social European. That is the compromise in the future. Thank you, Georgia.
Thank you very much, Joseph. We all heard it loud and clear. The Socioeconomic Committee is ready to stand and to support the engagement of youth very strongly. This is a wonderful message for all European youth. So thank you for all of your efforts in trying to making this something that it's more structured and becoming a reality day by day. So last opportunity to our audience for ask questions on the floor. And maybe Sylvia, just checking with you if there is anything else popping up online.
Yes, If no one there on site is raising any hands, I will take the power then of being in this privileged position and ask you a question that came from Adrian for the young speakers that we have sitting in the panel. She is pointing out the fact that, as we said also in the opening, today is Youth Day here at COP, and therefore Adrian was wondering how the young representatives that are here with us today have been actually involved in the work at COP, and how is it their experience so far?
I guess this is for you again, Zian.
Maybe I can start with this, and then maybe Sophia can add on as well her perspective. But I think Yango, as the official youth constituency of the UNFCCC, we have been actively collaborating with different stakeholders to advance climate action. At COP26 specifically, what actually myself have been doing this morning is that we have been presenting the Global Youth Statement, which we have consulted 40,000 youths on 15 different climate themes. And this morning we had the honor of presenting it to COP President Ziad Sharma, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, Executive Secretary of UNFCCC, Patricia Espinosa, and other guests. And I think this is a huge step forward for youth involvement in climate policy and decision making. So definitely Yango will continue to advance our collective youth position from across 135 countries and more and counting to the UNFCCC. As one of the observer constituencies, we believe that there is so much more that youths can contribute. And we really have been seeking, for example, to include youth inclusion as a paragraph in the multiple resolutions that have been introduced in negotiations. And this is one of our key interventions to ensure that youths from around the world, yourself included, who you just asked the question, can be formally recognized as a key stakeholder in climate conversations. And finally, I think beyond that, I think on our personal level, because I think this is also not just about high level engagements, but also about what we as youths can do on an everyday basis. And I think there is so much more to be done in terms of our own lifestyle choices, our own ability to contribute to this fight through our very own actions on the ground, in the grassroots organizations that we volunteer at. Those are often the actions and the commitments that go unrecognized, but are just as important in our collective fight against climate change. And if there's anything that Yango would like to amplify, it is really that the efforts of everyday youth and every one of us here in our daily lives is going to make the difference between whether we are able to engage in this fight in climate change, whether we are able to fulfill the promises we made at the Paris Agreement, and ultimately whether we are able to protect our shared future.
Thank you very much. I think that was a wonderful closure to our session today. I think we all should leave here feeling empowered that we are the one making the change. And also, Emmanuel, you and I can call ourselves youth today a little bit. We were part of this discussion, so I also feel empowered myself to go out and trying to open up and to improve and increase the participation of youth in this important moment in which we are really trying to shift the paradigm or the way that we are dealing with climate action. So I think we had a lot of thoughts that came through this conversation. We touched upon a number of issues, all revolving around the fact that just enacting and enabling the participation of youth doesn't only mean having young people consulted in what we are doing, but truly to try to embed their innovation potential, their ideas, their way of their creativity into finding the appropriate solutions to make a better decision for our future collectively. We also touched upon how this type of measures can have an effect in terms not only of engagement of youth, but also of vulnerable communities. We talked about gender quite a bit and the opportunity also to try to also provide innovation in the way that we are delivering solutions in better gender equality. And we touched upon the importance of engaging youth in also solving this rural-urban nexus that still very strongly needs a lot of attention and work in trying to have a more integrated, sustainable development model. So I think all in all of us now should be a little bit ambassadors of this cause of really trying to integrate as much as possible youth in the platform for decision making and for implementation. And as ICLE, I would like not only to thank all of our wonderful speakers and panelists and our great audience that has been so attentive and participative throughout the discussion, but also to pledge to continue this conversation with Jungo, of course, and to see how local policymaker can really build a coalition with all the potential the youth is bringing to the table and see how we can unlock really better decision making for the future. I will also conclude saying that I know that a lot of local governments across Europe are right now looking into what is the best way to include youth into the revision of the local climate and energy action plans, for example. And I think that there is a strong commitment of trying to make this as a co-creational and transformative process as much as possible. So I think we have a positive future ahead of us, still a lot of homework to do, but at least something to look forward to. So a big thank you once again to the colleagues from the European Economic and Social Committee and from the representatives from the European Economic and Social Committee, to our local policymakers, also the Mayor of Recife who has to leave us, and of course to the National Government of Italy and to Jungo for being with us today. And let's keep talking. Let's keep trying to find solutions all together. So I wish you all a wonderful continuation of your day and hope to talk together very soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much.